In this video, we look at default and static methods defined and implemented in a functional interface. Java 8 unlocked the interfaces and allowed them to be more flexible and extendable. Starting with Java 8 edition, we can add concrete implementations to an interface. As we know, adding any form of concrete implementations to an interface prior to Java 8 was not possible. The interface design is now ramped up. We can have fully defined and implemented methods in an interface. There are two categories of methods that we could define on an interface: a default method and a static method. The concrete implementations that belong to an instance of that implementation class are called default methods, while the other category of concrete methods that are associated to a class are called static methods. Let's look at default methods first. Default methods are the concrete code bodies provided in the interface itself. The only difference is that you have a prefix called default in front of the method name. We have an interface called employee here with one abstract method called find. We are going to provide a default method here which has fully functional concrete implementation. This method returns if the ID is an executive or not. In good olden days, in order to provide a default implementation, the usual strategy is to create an abstract class and implement the required implementation in it and leave the rest to the specific subclass to implement them. However, Java 8 unlocked the interface potential by subjecting them to modifications. The result is to add any concrete implementations to the interface like just we have seen here. The only requirement is to prefix the method with a default keyword, so the compiler will not mourn. Should we remove this one, you can clearly see the compiler being unhappy because it thinks that this is an abstract method. Now what happens if a class extends this interface? Any class that extends this interface automatically inherits this fully implemented method as well. Let's see this here. What we are doing here is we are implementing employee by extending it using a class called employee implementation class. Here we have a method, find method. Let's see if we can use isExec method in here. As you can see, the isExec method is not actually defined employee impl. Instead, it is the fully defined method in the employee. So it is an interface implementation method that has been used in the employee implementation class. Similar to default methods, you can also add concrete static methods to an interface. Let's see how we can enhance the employee interface by adding a static method. Let's return the default country of the employee. As you can see, a static modifier is attached to this method, meaning this particular method is a static method. So prefixing with the static keyword and the method becomes a static interface method straight away. Similar to static and instance method differences, default methods are instance methods and static are class associated methods. That is, we need to create an instance of the class and access the default methods as if we create an instance method in a normal fashion. We have created the class implementation and invoked isExec method by passing an ID to it. The isExec method is not part of the employee impl, instead is a part of the super interface, which is a default method. Similarly, we can use the interface name to access the static method. We have just used the static way of getting the default country from the interface. So in this session, we have learned about how we can add fully implemented methods to an interface. These methods can be a default method which are invoked via an instance of the class or static methods which are invoked via the interface class itself.